I've heard you use the phrase market research before. You're conducting market research. What does market research look like to you, and what are some unique ways you go about doing market research?
I mean, market research at the end of the day is the study of human behavior in in uh, as, in respect to a product or a brand or a service or whatever. Or it doesn't necessarily have to be. It could be I want to study about a certain group of people. For me, in market research happens to be more product or brand focused. So what we're trying to learn is um, what are the behaviors of our consumers or our audiences? How do they use our products? Or if we're launching a new product, how would they use their product? How would this fit into their lives? What is the perception of brand? If we're running a campaign or we're launching some sort of big idea, is it receptive? Is it going to work? Does it resonate with people, or is this going to be a complete shit show? Before you put something out there, you want to test to see with a smaller audience if it has any legs, right? And I think there's a lot of different ways to do it. I mean, you've got anything from one-on-one interviews to focus groups, meaning several different people within a group. It could be by age, it could be by ethnicity, it could be by region, different ways that you can slice and dice the audience. Then you've got surveys, which can be done in many different ways. It could be done in person, it could be online. There's also like user research in terms of like digital. So maybe we're trying to test out, if a website is easy for someone to use, or if it's logical flow, then you test through, platforms that way. Hi, Clarice. And then there's in the field or in market research, where you can study people in the actual environment that you want to study in. So in the store, how do they shop? What are their behaviors? How do they interact with the product on shelf?
So how do you find like when they're in the store, how they're interacting? How do you observe that?
Well, so there's you can have cameras set up, or you have people kind of just walking around like just kind of walking down the aisle. Someone could actually be in person there and just like walking around and observing. Or sometimes you just note that you let people, cameras, for example, can also be a thing too. And then there's also other ways where there's this particular way that I've tried to do things, and I try to do something different, where I tried to blend the idea of creating and curating an experience for the people who are researching in the environment of, or in the life, or in the day of the life, or the week of the life of a consumer. So, for example, one case study was I took my creative team to New York, because many of them had never been to New York before, and if they had, they kind of only had the lens of like going to Times Square and being a tourist. But like, what does a day in the life of a 20 to 30 something millennial woman who is a New Yorker, how does she live her life? And so we did everything from taking the commute that she would take from, say, Williamsburg in Brooklyn to the lower financial district in Manhattan, and seeing all the things that she would see.
So you're really experiencing this.
I want, like, you have to smell the smells, feel the feels, taste things, like all the things that this person would feel and do. And then along this kind of agenda of living the life of this person, also speaking to people along the route. So like, also just like, we went to a bar, we spoke to a millennial woman who works at a bar, and in doing so, we had a very specific audience in mind for the specific product, which happened to be a woman who was kind of white collar job, who worked at the office, blah, blah, blah. But in doing this kind of immersion, what we call an ethnographic scenario design, we learned that, people in the service industry are a huge target market that we're like not even thinking about, that would totally use this product because it really fits into their life and how they, between work and home and everything like that. And the fact that we also learned that the industry itself is such a huge industry in New York that it would be amiss if we didn't also target this particular audience as well. So sometimes you learn new things, insights.
So
by
through
actually
immersion.
Through immersion.
Through immersion, you discover stuff that you didn't.
Exactly.
Oh,
right? Because you can plan, but until you actually do something or be somewhere, you may not even notice these small details that come up. So
how does one, if they're not a market researcher, how does one enhance their own life experience by taking that kind of mindset on?
Like, what do you mean?
Like, could you apply that immersion idea and design and apply it to your own life to enhance it, to see things that you're not seeing?
Oh, for sure. I think it's almost like, we already do this kind of thing when we use Google. We like deep dive into, and we go into rabbit holes of certain things. And so it's the first thing is the curiosity of it. But the next step is like actually going out and physically going to explore it. You can read about it online all the time. You can talk about it with other people, but like to go live it and to say, okay, you have an intention to go actually explore something and really put yourself in a place or to go learn about it, even if it makes you feel uncomfortable. I think when you don't feel comfortable with something, it's like when you're the most open to learn about something new, and it could be in a positive or negative way, but the fact is it can change you in a way that you probably didn't even expect.
So curiosity is the first step.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What trends could you see emerging coming out of 2020 with different brands and companies?
Well, it'll be interesting to see from an experiential side, from when you think about events and stuff, how that's going to come to life again, because it's already starting to happen, which is like one of the most exciting things. Like what I'm excited for is like that, to me, that idea of collective experience, because, right now with COVID, everyone's kind of isolated in a way. We're slowly becoming not as isolated, and we're having more shared experiences, but the level of shared experience on the spectrum of more and more people in a place is something that we haven't experienced yet in over a year, right?
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see what those larger collective experiences will look like. Another thing is, especially with all the cultural wars that are happening now, what I call cultural wars, as well as, the political turmoil and tensions that we're having, that we will continue to have. And we're not out of this cultural war and this divided war for a long time. It will be interesting.
When you say, sorry, continue.
No, go ahead.
When you say culture wars, kind of define that, and how do then we resolve these disputes and these issues?
I mean, I think it's the evolution and progress of people that allow us to, it's empathy, really. Deep understanding on both sides, right? The cultural wars I'm talking about, it actually has seeped into politics.
Right.
When you think of race, you think of gender, you think of all these things, but also, traditional views versus progressive views of how things should be, religious versus non-secular views, etc. And I think like when both sides have a deep understanding and know how to move forward with each other in a way where we can respect each other, that's the only way we can move forward. But part of this kind of regressive and I don't think traditional is a bad thing. It's only when you think that is the only way to go and you don't accept everything else. And that, again, is the root of that all is empathy. Empathy is so important. And empathy is almost like, to me, like business acumen. Like you can have a certain level of it, but not everyone can really have it. And it's not something that you can completely learn either. There's only so much, right? You either kind of have it or you don't. And unfortunately, not all humans have empathy. Otherwise, this world would be perfect.
Well, how does one gain more empathy?
I mean, it's part of it is the curiosity of exploring and putting yourself in uncomfortable situations. It's a very deep understanding. It's not, so there's a difference between sympathy and empathy, right? Sympathy is like, less of this deep understanding and empathy is really about putting yourself in someone else's shoes. And so it's going and learning about some other culture, or, talking to someone who you wouldn't really talk to normally. Or it's going to learn, it's really, again, it's learning about different things and having an understanding of a different point of view.